On the evening of June 3rd, 1985, at approximately 20:45 hours, officers of the Montgomery County Sheriff's Department responded to multiple calls from concerned neighbors regarding an ongoing disturbance at 2349 Hemlock Avenue, Dayton, Ohio. Reports described persistent infant cries over a 4-day period, culminating in sudden and unexplained silence the previous evening. Neighboring residents stated that no adult had been seen entering or leaving the property during this time frame. Upon arrival at the single-story wood frame residence, deputies observed an accumulation of mail at the doorstep, overgrown grass in the front yard, and no immediate sign of activity within. A faint, unpleasant odor was noted emanating from the partially ajar kitchen window. Initial attempts to make contact were unsuccessful. No response was elicited from loud knocking or verbal commands. Given the repeated distress calls concerning an unattended child and the cessation of cries, officers forcibly entered the residence at 21:02 hours under exigent circumstances. Entry was gained through the back door, found unsecured. Inside, deputies discovered a disordered and unsanitary living space. The main living area contained scattered personal belongings, unwashed dishes, and garbage overflowing onto the floor. In the northeast corner of the room, a small wooden crib was situated near a curtained window. Inside the crib lay a male infant, later identified as Nathaniel Ray Harrow, age approximately 18 months. The child was motionless and unresponsive, dressed in a soiled one-piece sleeper. His body was covered in dirt and dried milk residue, with evidence of severe diaper rash and ulceration, consistent with prolonged exposure to waste. A single plastic baby bottle, capped but empty, lay on its side within the crib. Emergency medical personnel were summoned immediately. Paramedics arrived at 21:12 hours and pronounced the child deceased at 21:15 hours. No other individuals were present in the residence. A preliminary visual examination of the infant's body revealed signs consistent with dehydration and malnutrition, sunken eyes, dry lips, and prominent rib contours. There were no visible traumatic injuries beyond skin ulceration and rash. The body was transferred to the Montgomery County Coroner's Office for autopsy to determine exact cause and time of death. Further examination of the residence revealed no prepared meals or perishable foods in the kitchen. The refrigerator contained only condiments and expired dairy products. No fresh formula, milk, or other baby supplies were found. The only apparent provision for the child's nourishment was the empty bottle in the crib. Mail and utility statements located on the kitchen table identified the adult occupant as Sarah Ellen Harrow, age 23, the child's mother. A partially filled suitcase in the bedroom closet contained lightweight summer clothing and travel-sized toiletries. Neighbors reported that Sarah had been seen departing the home with a man described only as Rick, believed to be her boyfriend, approximately 1 week prior. At this time, no immediate explanation was available for the absence of adult supervision or any formal arrangements for the infant's care during this period. Witness interviews with neighbors were initiated on site to establish a timeline of events and potential leads for Sarah's current whereabouts. The residence was secured and sealed pending further investigation. Crime scene technicians conducted a thorough photographic documentation of the interior and exterior of the home. All items of potential evidentiary value, including the empty bottle, crib bedding, and personal documents, were cataloged and removed for forensic examination. The circumstances surrounding Nathaniel Ray Harrow's death, coupled with the total absence of his legal guardian, prompted the initiation of a homicide investigation. The Montgomery County Sheriff's Department issued a "Be on the Lookout" BOLO alert for Sarah Ellen Harrow and her unidentified male companion, last seen in a late-model sedan. An urgent inquiry was opened to determine flight records and possible destinations abroad. Sarah Ellen Harrow, born July 16, 1962, was the only child of Thomas and Margaret Harrow, both deceased at the time of this incident. Raised in Dayton, Ohio, Sarah attended local public schools and was known for sporadic attendance and low academic performance. Interviews with former classmates described her as introverted and emotionally distant. Sarah's adult life was marked by brief cohabitations and transient relationships, often with men of similarly unstable circumstances. Records show a history of small claims actions for unpaid rent and utility bills over several years. She maintained no consistent employment, instead relying on intermittent welfare assistance and occasional low-wage jobs in food service and retail. Nathaniel Ray Harrow was born on December 2, 1983. Paternity was legally established as James Patrick Harrow, a part-time mechanic with a documented history of substance abuse and repeated job losses. James had vacated the residence in November 1984 following a domestic dispute, as documented by police records noting loud arguments and minor property damage. His current whereabouts were unknown, and no formal child support arrangement existed in county records. Sarah and Nathaniel were last seen together in the neighborhood on May 26, 1985. Neighbor statements uniformly described Sarah as appearing indifferent to her son's welfare. She was reportedly seen leaving the residence the following morning, May 27, in the company of a man identified only as Rick, believed to be in his early 30s, with dark hair and a medium build. Witnesses observed Sarah placing a single suitcase in the vehicle, a light blue sedan of indeterminate make, before departing. No neighbor recalled any mention of childcare arrangements or babysitters for Nathaniel. Mrs. Irene Keller, a neighbor residing at 2353 Hemlock Avenue, stated that Sarah had made passing remarks about needing a real break and wanting to get away from everything, but offered no details about leaving her child. Subsequent investigation confirmed that Sarah Harrow had purchased airline tickets for a flight from Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky International Airport to Cancun, Mexico, departing May 27, 1985. She was accompanied by a male passenger booked under the name Richard Lane, believed to be the same Rick seen by neighbors. Authorities contacted the airline, which confirmed that both passengers boarded and completed the flight. No return ticket was purchased at that time. Records from U.S. Customs and Border Protection verified that Sarah Ellen Harrow and Richard Lane re-entered the United States at Miami International Airport on June 5, 1985, 2 days after Nathaniel's body was discovered. During Sarah's absence, neighbors reported hearing Nathaniel's cries for 4 consecutive days beginning the evening of May 30th. These cries, described as weak but persistent, ceased abruptly on the evening of June 2nd. No neighbor reported seeing anyone enter the residence during this period. The investigation quickly established that no adult caretaker had been present in the home from May 27th until the discovery of Nathaniel's body on June 3rd. The only known provision for the child's care was the empty bottle found in his crib. No additional food, formula, or diapers were located in the home. Given the total absence of any reasonable provision for Nathaniel's care, the Montgomery County Sheriff's Department classified the case as a suspected homicide by neglect. Sarah Ellen Harrow was listed as the primary person of interest, and a warrant was issued for her arrest upon re-entry into the United States. Efforts to locate Sarah and Richard Lane included notification of local law enforcement agencies and coordination with U.S. Customs officials to identify their incoming flight. Investigators prepared to intercept them upon arrival and conduct immediate interviews to establish the facts surrounding Nathaniel's death. On the morning of June 5, 1985, at approximately 8:15 hours, U.S. Customs and Border Protection flagged the arrival of Sarah Ellen Harrow and Richard Lane on an inbound flight from Cancun, Mexico, at Miami International Airport. Montgomery County Sheriff's Department detectives, working in cooperation with U.S. Marshals, took both individuals into custody without incident at the customs inspection area. Sarah was detained on a warrant for suspected homicide by neglect. Richard Lane was held for questioning as a material witness. Both were transported to a secure facility at the airport for initial interviews. During the first round of questioning, Sarah appeared disoriented and fatigued. She acknowledged traveling to Cancun with Richard Lane, stating that she needed a break and wanted time to think. When confronted with the discovery of Nathaniel's deceased body, she initially claimed that she had arranged for a neighbor to check on him, but could not provide a name or contact information for this alleged caretaker. Sarah admitted she had left only 1 bottle of milk for Nathaniel before her departure, asserting that she thought he would be okay for a few days. She offered no explanation for why she believed such minimal provision would suffice for an 18-month-old child. Richard Lane stated that he was unaware Sarah had left her son unattended, claiming he assumed the child was in the care of family or a babysitter. A search of Sarah's luggage revealed no items indicating preparation for extended travel with a child. No diapers, baby formula, or toys were present in her belongings. Her suitcase contained only adult clothing, swimwear, and personal care items. Following these initial statements, Sarah was transported to Montgomery County for formal processing. She was booked at the county jail under the charge of involuntary manslaughter, with additional charges pending review by the district attorney's office. Richard Lane was released from federal custody after providing a written statement and was not charged at that time. The Montgomery County Coroner's Office completed an autopsy on Nathaniel Ray Harrow on June 4, 1985. Findings confirmed death due to dehydration and starvation, consistent with being left alone without sustenance for an extended period. The official cause of death was listed as homicide by neglect. Sarah's arrest was widely reported in local media, generating public outrage and calls for severe penalties. Authorities proceeded with the investigation to establish the full extent of her culpability and to prepare for possible prosecution on more serious charges. In the days following Sarah Ellen Harrow's arrest, investigators conducted additional interviews with residents of the Hemlock Avenue neighborhood. The focus was to determine whether any adult had entered the residence after Sarah's departure on May 27, 1985. Neighbor statements were consistent and unanimous. No one saw an adult or babysitter enter the Harrow home during the week in question. Mrs. Irene Keller, who lived directly next door, stated she noticed the child's cries beginning on May 30th, describing them as constant, desperate wails that continued intermittently until the night of June 2nd. Other neighbors, including Mr. David Clark at 2345 Hemlock Avenue, confirmed these accounts and noted that the home's windows remained dark and no lights were observed at night. Mr. Clark stated he considered entering the home to check on the child, but was unsure of the legal consequences and instead called the sheriff's department. He expressed deep remorse for not having acted sooner, a sentiment echoed by other neighbors during interviews. The local community responded with shock and anger at the details emerging in the investigation. Several residents described Sarah as cold and distant in her interactions with neighbors and noted she seldom engaged in conversation beyond superficial greetings. There was no evidence that she had ever discussed plans for extended travel or sought help for Nathaniel's care prior to her departure. Community organizations began organizing candlelight vigils and memorials for Nathaniel. The Montgomery County Children's Services Board issued a statement reinforcing the importance of reporting suspected child neglect and promising to review policies for investigating homes where children's welfare is in question. Public sentiment turned increasingly hostile towards Sarah Ellen Harrow, with local newspapers publishing editorials condemning her actions and calling for a strong legal response. Prosecutors began preparing for formal charges, focusing on aggravated manslaughter due to the total disregard for the child's well-being and the conscious decision to leave him without proper care. Meanwhile, the Montgomery County Sheriff's Department continued gathering physical evidence from the residents, including additional photographs and forensic samples of the soiled crib and empty bottle. These materials were intended to corroborate witness statements and establish a clear chain of evidence for the anticipated court proceedings. In the weeks following Sarah Ellen Harrow's arrest, detectives with the Montgomery County Sheriff's Department conducted a systematic review of all evidence gathered at the scene and from subsequent interviews. The goal was to confirm the timeline of events and build a case for aggravated manslaughter charges. Forensic examination of the residence revealed that no other adult had entered the property from May 27th to June 3rd, 1985. Fingerprint analysis of the home's door handles and interior surfaces showed no prints aside from those belonging to Sarah and Nathaniel. A search of the home's pantry and refrigerator documented no food suitable for a toddler's consumption, further supporting the theory of deliberate neglect. Deputies cataloged the infant's crib and bedding as primary evidence. The mattress was heavily soiled with dried milk stains and bodily waste. Investigators noted that the single empty baby bottle contained no residue beyond dried milk at the base, consistent with a last feeding several days before death. No other bottles or food containers were located in the home. Autopsy findings on Nathaniel Ray Harrow were detailed in the coroner's final report, dated June 10, 1985. The report documented significant dehydration with sunken eyes, minimal tissue moisture, and reduced skin elasticity. The infant's stomach was empty, and no recent signs of digestion were present, confirming that Nathaniel had not eaten for a minimum of 72 hours prior to death. Death was officially classified as a homicide by neglect, caused by prolonged starvation and dehydration. Sarah Ellen Harrow, upon her extradition from Miami to Montgomery County, was held without bond pending further proceedings. During follow-up interrogations on June 12th and June 14th, she provided inconsistent statements. She admitted to leaving Nathaniel without proper care, but shifted blame to alleged mental stress and needing time for herself. She described her trip as an escape and stated she didn't think it would get that bad. Richard Lane, who had traveled with Sarah, denied any knowledge of Nathaniel's circumstances. He claimed that Sarah told him the child was with family and that he only learned of Nathaniel's death upon their return. His statement was corroborated by airline booking records and his employment log showing continuous presence in Cancun from May 27th to June 4th. Public outcry over the details of the case intensified after the coroner's report was released to local news outlets. Letters to the editor and radio call-ins called for the maximum possible penalty for Sarah, with many describing her conduct as monstrous. The Montgomery County District Attorney's Office announced it would pursue charges of aggravated manslaughter, citing the deliberate and reckless disregard for the child's welfare. A preliminary hearing was held on June 18, 1985. Sarah appeared in court, dressed in county jail attire, and remained largely silent during the proceedings. Prosecutors presented key forensic findings and excerpts from Sarah's statements, admitting to leaving Nathaniel alone for an extended period with no food or care. The judge determined there was sufficient probable cause to proceed to trial. During this time, investigators also sought to determine whether Sarah had any history of prior child neglect or endangerment. No official complaints or prior police interventions involving Nathaniel were found in department records. Neighbors described seeing the boy on rare occasions in the front yard, but did not recall any direct signs of previous abuse. However, their statements indicated a pattern of neglect in the form of minimal supervision and an apparent lack of maternal attachment. As the case moved toward trial, the community remained vigilant, with social service agencies reevaluating policies on early warning signs of neglect. The investigation's focus shifted to ensuring that all relevant evidence would withstand scrutiny during the upcoming court proceedings. Prosecutors continued to gather witness statements and expert testimony to support the charge that Sarah's actions were not a lapse in judgment, but a fatal, willful neglect of her child's basic needs. The trial of Sarah Ellen Harrow commenced on August 12, 1985, at the Montgomery County Courthouse. She faced one count of aggravated manslaughter of a child. The prosecution sought to prove that her decision to leave Nathaniel Ray Harrow alone for a week, with only a single bottle of milk, constituted deliberate and reckless endangerment leading directly to the child's death. The prosecution's case relied heavily on physical evidence and neighbor testimony. Witnesses recounted the 4 days of constant crying that ended abruptly, reinforcing the timeline of neglect. The medical examiner testified to the state of Nathaniel's body, emphasizing the extreme dehydration and starvation evident at autopsy. Forensic experts presented photographs of the crib, highlighting the soiled bedding and empty bottle. The stark images underscored the conditions in which Nathaniel spent his final days. Sarah's defense attorney argued that she suffered from emotional distress and temporary mental instability at the time of her departure. The defense did not deny that Nathaniel was left alone, but sought to reduce the charge to involuntary manslaughter by portraying Sarah as overwhelmed and lacking support. Sarah did not take the stand in her defense. Her recorded statements during interrogation, in which she admitted to leaving her child alone to get a break in Mexico, were played in court. Prosecutors argued these statements demonstrated a conscious choice rather than a momentary lapse. On August 19, 1985, after 4 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a unanimous verdict of guilty on the charge of aggravated manslaughter of a child. Sarah Ellen Harrow was sentenced to 20 years in state prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 15 years. The judge described her actions as an abandonment of maternal duty that resulted in a slow, torturous death of an innocent child. The courtroom was silent as the sentence was read. Sarah was immediately remanded to the Montgomery County Jail to await transfer to the Ohio Reformatory for Women in Marysville. Following Sarah Ellen Harrow's conviction and sentencing, the case of Nathaniel Ray Harrow's death was formally closed by the Montgomery County Sheriff's Department on August 25, 1985. Final reports cited conclusive evidence of prolonged neglect and starvation as the direct cause of the child's death, fully corroborated by witness testimony and forensic examination. The community's reaction to the outcome of the trial remained somber. Local media covered the sentencing extensively, framing it as a tragic but necessary conclusion to a crime that had deeply unsettled the public. Editorials reflected a mixture of relief that justice had been served and a sense of loss over the senseless death of a vulnerable child. In the months that followed, the Montgomery County Children's Services Board conducted an internal review of procedures related to child welfare checks. While no prior complaints had been filed against Sarah Harrow, the agency acknowledged that the signs of isolation and neglect observed by neighbors, even if subtle, might have warranted earlier intervention had they been reported. Efforts were made to educate the community on the importance of reporting suspected child neglect and on how to recognize early warning signs. Community outreach programs and training sessions for first responders were expanded, emphasizing the critical role of neighbors and community members in identifying at-risk children. Richard Lane, the man who traveled with Sarah to Mexico, was released from further questioning after his initial cooperation. Investigators found no evidence that he was aware of Nathaniel's situation or that he played any role in the child's death. Sarah Ellen Harrow began serving her sentence at the Ohio Reformatory for Women in Marysville in September 1985. Prison records indicate she was placed in a special housing unit for the first year due to the notoriety of her case and concerns for her safety. She did not appeal her conviction. Interviews conducted with Sarah by prison psychologists indicated that she continued to express remorse, though she maintained that she had not intended for Nathaniel to die. Over the years, the memory of Nathaniel Ray Harrow's brief life remained in the community's consciousness. A small plaque and memorial garden were established near Hemlock Avenue by local residents in 1986, dedicated to the memory of all children who deserve love and protection. The neighborhood slowly moved forward, but the haunting image of a child left alone remained a reminder of the consequences of neglect. For the officers and investigators involved, the case served as a stark lesson in the vulnerability of children and the importance of swift action when signs of distress are present. Detective Michael Avery, the lead investigator, later described it as the hardest case of my career, a tragedy that should never have happened. By the end of 1985, the Montgomery County Sheriff's Department had added new training modules specifically addressing child welfare and mandatory reporting requirements, reflecting the lasting impact of Nathaniel's death on law enforcement practices in the county. Sarah Ellen Harrow remains incarcerated with no parole eligibility until 2005. Her case stands as a reminder of how willful neglect can have fatal consequences and of the duty communities have to watch over their most vulnerable members.